Dr. Richard Chen's scalpel paused mid-incision. Something gleamed beneath the inflamed tissue of Margaret Thompson's chin, metallic. Wrong. Impossible. "Forceps," he said, voice tight. The surgical nurse complied. Chen probed carefully, separating angry red tissue from the foreign object. Not a tooth fragment, not medical implant. His breath caught. A bullet, small, tarnished, unmistakably a rifle round. But that wasn't what made the room fall silent. Carved into the brass casing, worn but legible, "What the hell?" Chen whispered. Claire Thompson Morrison leaned forward in the observation gallery above, her surgeon's composure cracking. Those were her father's initials. That was the year he'd served in Vietnam. 50 years of marriage. 50 years of secrets. And somehow, impossibly, a bullet from Thomas Thompson's war had ended up embedded in his wife's jaw. The question wasn't just medical anymore. It was, how does a husband's bullet end up inside his wife's face? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Along with the city you're watching from now, let's continue with the story. 2 weeks earlier, Margaret Ellen Thompson had woken at 5:30 in the morning, same as she's had for 46 years of marriage. The October dawn filtered through yellow curtains she'd sewn in 1980, casting familiar shadows across their modest, craftsman-style bedroom in Portland's Selwood neighborhood. She touched the space beside her. Empty, but still warm. Thomas was already up. At 68, Margaret moved with the practiced efficiency of a woman who'd taught elementary school for 35 years. Her silver hair, pulled into its habitual neat bun, framed a face that students had once called grandmotherly even when she was 40. Her hands, still faintly scented with chalk and lavender soap despite retirement 3 years ago, reached for her reading glasses on the nightstand. The wedding ring slipped loose on her thinning finger. She'd need to have it resized again. Downstairs, she found Thomas's blue work shirt already ironed and draped over the kitchen chair. Always blue. Never any other color. In 46 years, she'd learned not to ask why. The coffee was percolating 6 o'clock exactly, like clockwork. Through the window above the sink, she could see the light on in Thomas's garage workshop. Though she heard no tools, he was out there again, just sitting. Thomas William Thompson, at 69, still carried himself like the Army infantryman he'd been in 1960. His carpenter's hands were steady when he built the birdhouses Margaret loved, 47 of them over the years, each one still displayed in their backyard. But those same hands trembled when fireworks went off on the 4th of July. She'd learned to recognize the signs, the slight limp on rainy days, the way he checked the door locks 3 times before bed, how he never slept past 4:45 in the morning, no matter what. Old habits from guard-duty-goodle, he'd say. But Margaret knew it was more than that. The scar on his left shoulder, visible when he changed shirts, he'd never explained it. She'd never asked. There were spaces in their marriage, quiet territories neither ventured into. The locked metal box in his nightstand drawer was one of them. Olive green, military issue, about the size of a shoebox. Thomas kept the only key on a chain with his dog tags. Margaret had seen him take it out sometimes. Late at night, when he thought she was asleep, he'd sit at the kitchen table, the box open, staring at whatever was inside. She'd watch from the bedroom doorway, then retreat silently, giving him his ghosts. Privacy was a form of respect. She believed they all carried things too heavy to share. Their home reflected 46 years of accumulated tenderness, the kitchen table where they'd eaten breakfast together over 17,000 times. The living room mantel, with exactly 3 photographs, their wedding in 1977. Their daughter, Claire's medical school graduation in 2004, and a family trip to the Oregon coast in 2015. What wasn't there spoke louder than what was. No photos of Thomas in uniform, no military memorabilia displayed, no American flag decal on their car. Their daughter Claire understood the silence better than Margaret did, though for different reasons. Dr. Claire Thompson Morrison, 42, lived 3 hours north in Seattle. Thoracic surgeon, divorced 3 years, no children. She visited every 6 to 8 weeks, called her mother twice weekly, and maintained a careful, cordial distance from her father. Margaret had watched that distance grow over decades. Thomas had attended every school play, every softball game, every parent-teacher conference. But he'd always sat in the back, always left early, always maintained that invisible barrier. Claire had interpreted it as disinterest. Margaret knew better. She'd seen how Thomas's hands shook when he held their newborn daughter, how he'd whispered, "I won't let anything hurt you," with an intensity that bordered on desperation. Whatever Thomas had seen in Vietnam, whatever he'd done or failed to do, it had built walls he didn't know how to climb. Last week, Claire had called with news of her divorce being finalized. Margaret had cried. Thomas had picked up the extension, listened silently, then said only, "You okay, honey?" Claire's response clipped. Professional had been clearly meant for her mother, not her father. After hanging up, Thomas had gone to his workshop. Margaret had found him there at midnight, the metal box open on his workbench. He'd closed it quickly when she approached, but not before she glimpsed something inside a small plastic bag, empty. "Just remembering," he'd said. She'd made him warm milk. They'd sat together in comfortable silence, her hand on his shoulder, feeling the old scar tissue beneath his T-shirt. The thing about long marriages, Margaret had learned, was knowing when to speak and when to simply be present. Now, 2 weeks later, she stood in their kitchen and touched her chin, absently. A small bump had appeared there yesterday morning, nothing serious, probably just a bug bite. She'd mentioned it to Thomas at breakfast, through the window. The workshop light finally went dark. Thomas emerged, shoulders slightly hunched, moving like a man carrying invisible weight. Margaret smiled and reached for the skillet. Thursday meant cornbread. Some rituals were sacred. She had no idea that the small bump on her chin would shatter every careful silence they'd built. Monday morning, October 16th. Margaret woke at 5:42, 2 minutes before her alarm. Her hand went to her chin in the darkness, a small bump the size of a pea, just left of her jawline. She pressed it gently, tender but not painful, probably nothing, an insect bite. She was 68. Her body did odd things now. The bedroom was still dark when she rose, moving through the familiar choreography of 46 years. Thomas's blue work shirt hung on the chair where she had placed it the night before, pressed and ready. The coffee maker downstairs began its automated percolation at precisely 6 o'clock. She was cracking eggs into the skillet when Thomas shuffled in. his hair standing at odd angles, feet bare on the cold kitchen tile. He wrapped his arms around her from behind their morning ritual and kissed the top of her head. Then his fingers brushed her chin. He went still. "You got something there, Maggie." She touched it again. "Just a bug bite, honey." But Thomas tilted her face toward the window light, his thumb gentle on her jaw. His eyes held something she couldn't quite read. Worry. Yes. But something deeper, something that looked almost like recognition. "When did you notice it? This morning?" "It's nothing, Tom." He released her, but his hand trembled slightly as he poured his coffee. Margaret noticed. She always noticed. The radio on the counter clicked on 6:15. Same station, same morning show they'd listened to for 2 decades. Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA filled the kitchen. Thomas reached over and switched it off. "Too early for that noise," he muttered, except it had never been too early before. Margaret watched him settle at the table, watched him touch his own left shoulder absently, the way he did when something troubled him. The scar beneath his shirt, the one he'd never explained. "Thomas, it's probably nothing," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Like you said, a bite." They ate breakfast in unusual silence. That evening, Margaret stood at the kitchen window washing dishes, watching the light in Thomas's workshop. It had been on for 2 hours. No sound of saws or sanders, just light. She dried her hands and walked across the dark lawn. Opening the workshop door, Thomas sat on his wooden stool, hunched over the workbench. The metal box, the one he always kept locked, lay open before him. In his palm, a small plastic bag. Empty! He looked up, and for a moment she saw something raw in his face. Fear, guilt, a terrible, confused panic. "Tom." He shoved the bag back into the box, closed the lid, just remembering. Remembering what? Nothing. Old things. "Come on, let's go inside." But Margaret had seen. The bag that should have held something didn't. By Tuesday morning, the bump had grown to the size of a walnut. Margaret pressed powder over it, trying to conceal the swelling. Thomas noticed anyway. At breakfast, he burned the bacon, something he hadn't done in 20 years of making Tuesday breakfasts. "You need to call the doctor," he said. "It's just swollen. Give it a day or 2. "Maggie." "Don't fuss over nothing, Thomas." But it wasn't nothing, and they both knew it that night. Margaret woke at 2 in the morning. Thomas's side of the bed was empty. She found him in the living room, the metal box open on the coffee table. He was staring at that empty plastic bag, turning it over and over in his hands. She watched from the doorway, her heart tight. In 46 years, she'd learned to read his silences. This one screamed. She went back to bed without announcing herself. Wednesday brought no improvement. The swelling spread toward her neck, the skin taut and shiny, reddish at the edges. When Margaret tried to chew toast, pain shot through her jaw. Thomas's anxiety manifested in small ways, the way he watched her touch the swelling, the way he stood too close, the way his coffee cup rattled against the saucer. "We're going to the doctor tomorrow," he announced. "Let's wait through the weekend." "No!" His voice was sharp, almost panicked. "Tomorrow." They'd had perhaps 3 arguments in 46 years. This became the 4th. "You're overreacting, Thomas, and you're being stubborn." "It's my body. Please." He grabbed her hands. and his was shaking. "Please, Maggie, I need you to see a doctor. I need—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Just please." The desperation in his voice silenced her. Margaret tried to remember their anniversary dinner 2 weeks ago. Thomas had drunk more wine than usual, rare for him. He'd held her face in his hands, kissed her chin specifically, said something about taking away all burdens, even his own. She'd thought it romantic, if a bit maudlin. Now, standing in their kitchen, with his trembling hands in hers, that memory took on a darker shade. By Thursday morning, the swelling was undeniable, the size of a golf ball, the skin stretched thin and painful. Margaret couldn't hide it with makeup anymore. When their neighbor Eleanor stopped by, she gasped, "Margaret, honey, what happened to your face?" "Just an abscess." "Going to the doctor today." Eleanor's face creased with concern. My mother had something like that. Turned out to be a salivary gland tumor. After Eleanor left, Margaret sat at the kitchen table, touching the swelling with increasing fear. Cancer, the word Eleanor hadn't said but implied. Thomas made the appointment without asking. When he hung up the phone, he looked at Margaret with eyes that held 50 years of secrets. "Whatever they find," he said quietly, "it's my fault." "Tom, what are you—" "I need to tell you something, but not yet, not until we know." "Know what?" He just shook his head. Friday morning, October 20th, Providence Medical Urgent Care smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Margaret sat on the examination table, paper crinkling beneath her, while Dr. Michael Patterson, a kind-faced man in his 50s, gently probed the swelling on her chin. She winced. "How long has this been present, Mrs. Thompson?" "4 days. Getting worse each day," Thomas added from his chair in the corner. His hands gripped his knees, knuckles white. Patterson pressed the tissue carefully, his expression thoughtful. "Any dental work recently? Tooth pain?" "A tooth cracked last month, but it didn't hurt. This presents like a periapical abscess, an infection at the tooth root that spread to the surrounding tissue." He rolled his stool back, made notes on his tablet. "I'm prescribing amoxicillin, 500 milligrams, 3 times daily. If you're not significantly better in 48 hours, we'll need imaging." Margaret felt relief flood through her. Treatable, not cancer. Thomas remained silent, unconvinced. In the waiting room afterward, while Margaret filled her prescription at the pharmacy window, Thomas stepped outside. She watched him through the glass doors pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply. His body language screamed agitation. When he returned, his face was carefully neutral. "Just called Claire with an update." Margaret knew that wasn't the whole truth. In 46 years, she'd learned to read the small tells the way he wouldn't meet her eyes, the tension in his jaw. "What else did you talk about?" "Nothing. Just wanted her to know." But that night, after Margaret had taken her first antibiotic dose and fallen asleep early, exhausted from pain, Thomas sat alone in the living room. The metal box lay open on the coffee table. He stared at the empty plastic bag, then at his own hands as if they belonged to someone else. He picked up his phone, pulled up a search. "Can objects pass between people through skin contact?" The results were medical articles about foreign body reactions, wound infections, nothing that explained what he feared he'd done. He deleted the search history. Saturday brought no relief. If anything, The swelling had spread, creeping toward Margaret's neck. The skin felt hot beneath her fingertips, angry red at the edges. Her temperature read 99.8. Thomas called to Patterson's office. Weekend answering service. A nurse advised continuing the antibiotics, using warm compresses, returning Monday if symptoms worsened. "Monday's too long," Thomas said, after hanging up. "Tom, it's only been 36 hours. Antibiotics need time." "No, something's wrong. This isn't right." "You're not a doctor." "I know wrong when I see it." The edge in his voice silenced her. They sat together on the couch, the television playing something neither watched. Thomas's hand found hers, gripped it too tightly. "Maggie, I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered. "What?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "I love you. That's all." But it wasn't all, and the weight of unspoken words pressed down on both of them. That night, Margaret pretended to sleep while Thomas sat at the edge of their bed, head in his hands. She heard him whisper something that sounded like, "I'm so sorry, Maggie. I'm so goddamn sorry." Is sorry for what Sunday morning? Their church routine broken. Margaret was too unwell. The fever climbing to 100.4. Thomas suggested the emergency room. "Let's wait for Dr. Patterson tomorrow." "What if tomorrow's too late?" "Too late for what?" "Thomas, it's a swollen jaw, not a heart attack." "You don't understand." "Then help me understand. Tell me what's scaring you so badly." He looked at her with eyes full of 50 years of locked doors. "I can't, not yet." By 4 in the afternoon, Margaret relented. The swelling now measured the size of a tennis ball. The skin stretched so tight it gleamed. Her temperature had climbed to 100.4. When the phone rang at 6 o'clock, Thomas answered. "Mom, I'm coming down tonight." Claire's voice was clear enough that Margaret heard from across the room. "Honey, don't drive 3 hours for—" "I'm already in the car. See you at 8. Margaret looked at Thomas. "You called her again, didn't you?" "No, I swear. She must have just—" "Don't lie to me, Thomas." The rare sharpness in her voice made him flinch. "Okay. Yes. I texted her this morning, sent a photo of the swelling. She's a doctor. Maggie, she needs to see this." "You went behind my back because you're being stubborn, and something's very wrong, and His voice cracked. "I can't lose you." The raw fear in his voice extinguished her anger. Claire arrived at 8:15, letting herself in with her key. She was still in the business casual clothes she'd worn to the hospital that morning, her dark hair pulled back, her surgeon's face firmly in place. "Mom, let me see?" Margaret tilted her chin up under the living room lamp. Claire's fingers were cool and professional as they palpated the swelling. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed her. "This isn't a dental abscess," Dr. Patterson said. "I know what he said, but this—" She pressed gently, feeling the contours. "Does this feel hard? Like there's something solid inside?" Margaret's breath caught. "What do you mean, something? A foreign body? Could be calcium deposits. Could be scar tissue from an old injury. Could be—" She paused. "We need a CT scan. Tonight?" "It's Sunday night. I have privileges at Legacy Emmanuel. I'll make calls." Thomas stood abruptly. "I need some air." He walked out the front door before either woman could respond. Claire watched him go, her professional mask slipping to reveal the hurt daughter beneath. "Has he been acting strange?" "Your father always acts a little strange." "No, I mean stranger than usual, because his behavior on the phone this morning." She shook her head. "Never mind. Let's focus on you." But Margaret was watching through the window as Thomas paced the front yard, phone to his ear again, his free hand pressed against his left shoulder, against that scar he'd never explained. "Claire, what do you think is in there?" Her daughter met her eyes. "I don't know, Mom, but whatever it is, we need to find out soon." The way she said it, clinical, careful, frightened Margaret more than anything else. "Could it be cancer? Let's not jump to conclusions." But Claire hesitated. "In medical school, we had a case study, a patient with foreign body reaction to old shrapnel that had migrated through tissue over decades. It presented similarly to this." "I've never been injured, never been shot." "I know, but somehow there's something metallic in there. The X-rays will tell us more." Thomas returned, his face pale. "I made a call to someone who might understand this." "Understand what, Dad?" He looked at his daughter. For a long moment, the longest eye contact they'd shared in years. "I can't explain until we know for sure. But Claire," his voice dropped, "whatever they find in that scan, I need you to know it's not your mother's fault, it's mine." Legacy, Emmanuel Medical Center's emergency room, held the particular fluorescent brightness of institutional health care. Everything visible. Nothing hidden. Margaret sat on a gurney in Bay 7, curtain half drawn, while nurse practitioner Janet Williams took her vitals with practiced efficiency. Blood pressure 145/90, temperature 101.2, heart rate 98. Claire stood nearby, no longer the daughter, but the physician, watching the monitor with clinical detachment that didn't quite mask her worry. Janet started an IV line in Margaret's left hand. "We're giving you ceftriaxone's stronger antibiotic than what you've been taking." Shao ordered a CT scan. Dad. Thomas sat in the corner chair, hands folded in his lap, but his right leg bounced constantly. He hadn't stopped watching Margaret since they'd arrived at 7:45. "Mr. Thompson, would you like some coffee?" Janet asked gently. He shook his head without looking away from his wife. The IV pump beeped softly outside their bay. The ER's familiar symphony played call bells. Monitor alarms, hurried footsteps, hushed urgent conversations. Somewhere, a code blue was called. Everyone in Bay 7 tensed. Thomas's hand went to his left shoulder, rubbing it unconsciously. Claire noticed. She always noticed everything in that careful surgeon's way. "Dad, is your shoulder bothering you?" He dropped his hand immediately. "Old injury, acts up sometimes." "From when?" "Long time ago, Vietnam." The word hung between them, sharp and rarely spoken. Thomas's jaw tightened. It was the most he'd acknowledged about the war in Claire's entire 42 years. Margaret reached for his hand. He took it, held it too tightly. At 9:20, a transport volunteer wheeled Margaret toward radiology. Claire walked alongside. Thomas started to follow, but Claire stopped him. "Dad, You can't come in. Rada shun." They stood in the hallway, suddenly alone. Overhead lights hummed. A housekeeping cart rattled past. "Claire, I need to tell you something." His daughter faced him and, for the first time in years, really looked at him. Saw the tremor in his hands, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of weeks without proper sleep, the way he stood like a man carrying invisible weight. "What is it?" "There's a box in my nightstand at home. It's locked." "Okay, inside." He swallowed hard. Inside there was a bullet from Vietnam, the one they pulled out of me in '69. Claire's eyes widened. "You were shot. Shoulder? It's where the scar is." He touched it again. "I kept the bullet." "Stupid. Maybe, but I needed to remember something." "Remember what?" "That's not important right now. What's important is—" His voice dropped to a whisper. 2 weeks ago, our anniversary. I had too much to drink, and the next morning, when I checked the box, the bullet was gone." Claire stared at her father. "Gone, missing from the plastic bag where I kept it. You think you lost it?" "I thought so, at first. But then your mother's chin started swelling, and He couldn't finish. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that whatever they find in that CT scan, it might be my bullet, and I don't know how it got there, but it's my fault." Claire opened her mouth, closed it, her medical training warred with daughterly concern. "That's medically impossible. Bullets don't just transfer from one person to another." "I know, but I also know my bullet is missing, and your mother has something metallic in her jaw, and those two things can't be coincidence." Before Claire could respond, the radiology door opened. Margaret was wheeled back out, looking small and tired on the gurney. "All done," she said. "When do we get results?" "Zhao is reading them now." The transport volunteer said. They returned to Bay 7 to wait. Thomas resumed his corner chair. Claire paced. Margaret dozed fitfully under warm blankets, the fever medication making her drowsy. At 10:15, Kevin Zhao appeared young, serious, carrying a tablet with CT images. The attending physician, Lisa Martinez, accompanied him. Mrs. Thompson. Martinez pulled up a stool. "We have your results." Margaret sat up straighter. Thomas stood, moved to her bedside. "Doctor," Zhao turned the tablet toward them. "This is a cross-section of your jaw and neck. See this white spot here?" He pointed to a small, bright area in the tissue. "That's a metallic foreign body." The room went still. "Metal density, approximately 8 millimeters by 3 millimeters. Shape is consistent with—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "Well, it looks like a bullet fragment." Margaret's hand went to her mouth. "A bullet. How I've never been shot. Never had any accident like that." Claire leaned over the tablet, studying the image with professional intensity. Could it be shrapnel, old dental material? "Shape's wrong for dental work," Dr. Zhao said, "and the metal density suggests copper-jacketed lead ammunition." Thomas's face had gone gray. Martinez looked at Margaret. "Mrs. Thompson, is there any possibility of childhood injury? You don't remember BB gun accident? Anything?" "No, nothing. I don't understand this at all." What about you, Mr. Thompson? Dr. Martinez turned to him. Any history we should know about? Thomas's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Claire answered for him. My father was wounded in Vietnam. Took a bullet to the shoulder in 1969. Dr. Martinez's eyebrows rose. Do you still have fragments in your body, Mr. Thompson? No. They took it out at the field hospital. Are you certain sometimes small fragments remain? They showed it to me. The whole bullet. He stopped. Margaret looked at her husband. Tom. His hands were shaking now, trembling so badly he had to grip the bed rail. It's my fault. Oh, God, it's my fault. Dad, what are you saying? Claire demanded. The box. At home. Check the box. The bullet's gone. The physicians exchanged glances. Dr. Martinez spoke gently. Mr. Thompson, I think you should sit down. You're very pale. I kept it in a box, but for 50 years, and now it's gone, and it's inside my wife. And I don't remember, his voice cracked, I don't remember putting it there, but what else could have happened? The bay fell silent except for the IV pump's soft beeping. Claire broke the silence. Dr. Martinez, my father has PTSD from Vietnam. Sometimes his memory... No. Margaret's voice was sharp. Thomas didn't do anything to me. I would have known. I would have felt it. But even as she said it, doubt flickered in her eyes. That anniversary night, Thomas drunk, holding her face, kissing her chin specifically. Had something happened while she slept? Dr. Martinez made a decision. We're admitting you. Mrs. Thompson, the infection is serious, and we need to remove that foreign body surgically. Dr. Chen, our maxillofacial surgeon, will see you in the morning. Surgery. Margaret's voice was small. The object is causing significant inflammation. We need to take it out. She looked at Thomas. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to have someone from psychiatry stop by to talk with you. Not because you're in trouble, but because you seem very distressed. I don't need psychiatry. I need to know my wife will be okay. We'll do everything we can. At 1:30 in the morning, Margaret was finally settled in a private room on the 4th floor. Claire had pulled strings, called in favors. Thomas sat in the chair that converted to a bed, but he wouldn't lie down. Margaret was sleeping, pain medication and antibiotics dripping into her IV. The room was dim except for the monitor's glow. Claire touched her father's shoulder. Dad, come outside. Let her rest. We in the family waiting area empty at this hour, smelling of stale coffee and anxiety. Thomas finally broke. The bullet in that box was mine. From Vietnam. The medic gave it to me after surgery. I had my initials carved on it, T, and the year, 69. Claire sat beside him on the vinyl couch. Why did you keep it? Reminder of the worst day of my life, the day Captain Morrison. He stopped. That's not important. What's important is I kept it locked up for 50 years, barely looked at it. But our anniversary, 2 weeks ago, I drank too much wine, started thinking about the war, about Morrison, about guilt, what happened. I don't remember clearly. I remember kissing your mother, telling her I wanted to take away all my burdens, telling her I'd carry everything so she wouldn't have to. He pressed his palms against his eyes. Next thing I clearly remember, it's morning, and when I checked the box later that day, the bullet was gone. You think you put it in Mom's jaw while she slept? I don't know. I don't know. But how else? Dad, Claire's voice was firm. You couldn't have surgically implanted a bullet without Mom waking up, without blood everywhere, without you remembering at least some of it. Then where is it? Why is my bullet inside your mother? Claire had no answer. At 4 in the morning, she drove to her parents' house, let herself in with her key, went straight to their bedroom. The metal box sat in Thomas's nightstand, unlocked now. She opened it. Inside an empty plastic bag, a bronze star medal she'd never known existed. A photograph of her father in fatigues with another soldier, both young and smiling. A yellowed newspaper clipping about a rescue operation in Da Nang. And an unopened letter addressed to Thomas, postmarked March 70. She picked up the bronze star, read the citation for heroic achievement in ground operations against hostile forces. Her father was a decorated hero, and she'd never known. She photographed everything with her phone, then returned to the hospital. Thomas was still in the waiting area, head in his hands. Dad, why didn't you tell us about the bronze star? He looked up, saw the phone in her hand. You went through the box. You told me to. Dad, you were a hero. Why keep it secret? Because 17 people died that day, Claire, 17. Being called a hero when you couldn't save everyone. His voice broke. I didn't deserve that medal. What, 17 people? The newspaper says you saved 12 children. The ones Morrison killed, the ones I couldn't stop him from. He couldn't continue. Claire sat beside him, and for the first time in her adult life, put her arm around her father's shoulders. He leaned into her, and she felt him shaking. Whatever happened in Vietnam, she said quietly. You've been punishing yourself for 50 years. Maybe that needs to stop. Not until your mother's okay. Not until I know I didn't hurt her. At 6:30, they returned to Margaret's room. She was awake, watching the sunrise through the window. Tom, she said when he entered. Come here. He sat on the edge of her bed. She took his hand. Whatever happened with that bullet? I know one thing. You didn't hurt me. Not on purpose. Not ever. But Maggie, no. Listen to me. In 46 years, you've been nothing but gentle. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out. Together. He leaned his forehead against hers, the way he had for 46 years of marriage. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Well, you've got me anyway. At 7:30, Diplomatist Richard Dechen arrived with the surgical consent forms. We'll go in tomorrow morning, first case, remove the foreign body, clean out the infection. You'll need to be admitted overnight after surgery, maybe 2 nights, depending on how it goes. Margaret signed the papers without hesitation. One thing, Dr. Chen said, we'll analyze whatever we remove. Try to determine how long it's been there, how it got there. These questions have answers. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, we'll find them. After he left, Margaret looked at her husband and daughter. No more secrets, she said. After this is over, we tell each other everything. Deal. Deal, Claire said immediately. Thomas nodded slowly. Everything, I promise. But his hand still shook when he picked up his coffee. Wednesday morning, October 25th, Margaret had been NPO nothing by mouth since midnight. The preoperative area of Legacy Emmanuel's surgical wing hummed with controlled urgency. Nurses moving between curtained bays, monitors beeping in steady rhythms. Margaret lay on the gurney in Bay 3, an IV already placed in her left hand, running clear fluids and preoperative antibiotics. She wore a hospital gown that tied in the back, her silver hair covered by a surgical cap, her wedding ring taped to her finger per protocol. Dr. Marcus Webb, the anesthesiologist, reviewed her medical history on his tablet. Any problems with anesthesia before, so dear Mrs. Thompson never had surgery. First time for everything. His smile was kind. I'll be monitoring you the entire time. You'll be completely asleep, won't feel anything. Thomas sat in the chair beside her, wearing the hospital-provided scrubs they'd given him for the family waiting area. His hand never left Margaret's. Claire stood near the monitors, dressed in the surgical observation attire that would allow her into the gallery. She was every inch the physician, now professional, composed, but her fingers twisted her ID badge lanyard constantly. Mrs. Thompson, I need you to initial here, acknowledging the risks. A surgical nurse offered a tablet and stylus. Margaret scanned the consent form. Proximity to facial nerve, possible paralysis. Infection could spread to jawbone. Risks of general anesthesia in older patients. She signed without hesitation. Whatever they find in there, Thomas said quietly. It's on me, not you. Margaret turned her head on the pillow to look at him. We're in this together, Tom. Always have been. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to hers, their gesture. 46 years in the making. I love you, Maggie. How I know? Claire watched her parents, and something shifted inside her. This was what love looked like after decades. Not grand gestures or passionate declarations, but this quiet certainty. The way her mother's hand never trembled when reaching for her father's. The way his thumb traced circles on her palm. Claire's own marriage had lasted 8 years before collapsing under the weight of medical school schedules and mismatched ambitions. She'd given up, walked away, told herself it was the practical choice. Looking at her parents now, her father damaged but never stopping. Her mother strong enough to let him be her protector when needed. Claire wondered if she'd mistaken exhaustion for incompatibility. Mr. Thompson, a nurse, stood at the curtain. There's someone here asking for you. Says it's important. Thomas looked at Margaret. Go, she said. I'm fine for a few minutes. In the family waiting area, an elderly Vietnamese man stood by the window, late 70s, thin, wearing a pressed button-down shirt and slacks. He turned when Thomas entered. Mr. Thompson. Thomas Thompson. Thomas's brow furrowed. Yes, my name is Bien Nguyen. The man's voice carried a faint accent. I think you saved my life in 1969. Thomas went still. His hand found the wall for support. How did you... Your daughter found me. Ben gestured to Claire, who'd followed Thomas out. She called me yesterday, told me you were here, that you were struggling with memories of the war. Claire's expression was sheepish. I Googled the rescue operation from the newspaper clipping, found an interview with survivors from 20 years ago, tracked down contact information. I thought, she looked at her father. I thought you should know you made a difference. Ben stepped closer to Thomas. I was 7 years old. Da Nang, March 9th, 1969. There was artillery fire, mortar rounds. My village was burning. Thomas's face had gone pale. I remember. You carried me. I was bleeding from shrapnel in my leg. You ran through fire with me on your back. Ben's eyes filled. You pulled me and 11 other children out of that hell, put us in a truck, sent us to the refugee center. I couldn't save everyone, but you saved me. Ben's voice strengthened. I'm a doctor now. Surgeon, like your daughter. Cardiac. I've saved hundreds of lives, maybe thousands over my career. He reached into his pocket, withdrew his phone, showed Thomas a photo. 4 children, 9 grandchildren, all of them exist because you didn't give up. Thomas's breath came shallow. Morrison killed 17 people that day, and you saved 12 children who grew into adults, had families, contributed to the world. Ben gripped Thomas's arm. I came here to tell you you don't need to carry guilt that isn't yours. Captain Morrison's actions were his own. Your actions saved lives, including mine. Thomas couldn't speak. His shoulders shook. Claire put her hand on her father's back. Dad, we need to get back. Mom's going into surgery soon. At 7:15, Margaret was wheeled into operating room 3. The space was bright, cold, filled with stainless steel and monitoring equipment. Richard Chen stood at the surgical sink, scrubbing his hands and forearms with methodical precision. Claire climbed the stairs to the observation gallery. Through the glass, she could see her mother on the table, Dr. Webb placing the anesthesia mask over her face. In the surgical waiting area, Thomas sat with Ben. Neither spoke. The Vietnamese doctor's presence was comfort enough, a living reminder that some actions transcend guilt. 7:20. Dr. Chen made the first incision along Margaret's jawline, following the natural crease. Blood welled up, quickly suctioned away. The tissue beneath was angry, inflamed, yellow with pus. Significant infection, Dr. Chen said to his resident. Culture swab. A nurse took the sample. 7:35. Careful dissection through tissue layers, avoiding the branches of the facial nerve. One wrong cut could leave Margaret with a paralyzed face. Claire leaned forward in the gallery, her medical training making her evaluate every movement of Dr. Chen's scalpel. 7:42. Dr. Chen paused. I can see it. Through the inflammation, something metallic gleamed. He used forceps to probe around the object. It was embedded in a fibrous capsule, the body's natural response to foreign material, walling it off. Definitely metallic, Angela Foster said. Assisting, consistent with projectile. 7:50. Dr. Chen grasped the object with forceps, pulled gently. It didn't move. Tissues got it locked down. Need more dissection? 8:05. As Dr. Chen separated the fibrous tissue from the object, Claire could see it clearly through the glass. Small, cylindrical, copper-colored, darkened with age. A bullet, her father's bullet. 8:15. The object came free with a soft sound of tearing tissue. Dr. Chen placed it carefully in a specimen cup. The surgical nurse held it up to the overhead light. Claire gasped. Engraved on the brass casing, still visible despite 50 years. T. Bo. 1960. What the hell? Dr. Chen muttered. This is a rifle bullet. Remington. He turned it with the forceps, with initials carved on it. Doctor, Foster peered at it. How long has this been in there? Chin examined the tissue capsule he'd removed. That's the strange part. This encapsulation is fresh, too. 3 weeks old at most. But the bullet itself, he held it to the light again. This oxidation pattern, this is 50-plus years old. That doesn't make sense, the resident here said. No, it doesn't. Chen looked up at the observation gallery, where Claire sat frozen. It's like someone surgically placed a 50-year-old bullet into fresh tissue. But there's no entry wound on her skin. No scarred tissue, no evidence of recent trauma. 8:45. Margaret woke in the recovery room to blurred shapes and muffled sounds. Her throat hurt. Her chin felt distant, numb. Thomas's face swam into focus above her, his hand wrapped around hers. Did they get it out? Her voice was rough from the breathing tube. Yes? He swallowed hard. Maggie, it was my bullet, with my initials. From 69. She stared at him, trying to process through the anesthesia fog. 9:30. Dr. Chen entered the consultation room where Thomas, Claire, and Ben waited. He carried the specimen cup with the bullet inside. He set it on the table. The engraving caught the fluorescent light Tawote 1960. Mr. Thompson, I need to ask you directly. Is this yours? Thomas picked up the cup, hands trembling. Yes, I was shot in the shoulder in Vietnam, March 9th, 69. They removed this bullet at the field hospital. I kept it. How did it get into your wife's jaw? I don't know. I swear to God, I don't know. Dr. Foster joined them. The tissue reaction is definitely recent, within the last 2 to 3 weeks. But Mr. Thompson, there's no entry wound on your wife's skin, no scarring that would indicate surgical placement. Could it have been there for decades? Claire asked. Dormant, somehow. No, the fibrous capsule is fresh. Dr. Chen frowned, thinking. Unless Dr. Foster leaned forward. What could there have been transfer through shared bodily fluid? Dr. Chen spoke slowly, working through the theory. If Thompson had a healing wound, say his old shoulder injury was breaking down, expelling the bullet fragment naturally, and Mrs. Thompson had a small cut or abrasion on her chin, in intimate contact. Dr. Foster continued. Could a foreign body theoretically transfer through lymphatic channels? Chen looked skeptical. That's unprecedented, but not impossible. We've documented foreign bodies migrating through lymph and blood vessels, usually within the same body, not between bodies, but theoretically. Are you saying my bullet worked its way out of my shoulder after 50 years? Thomas said slowly, and into Margaret's jaw. Through what? A cut, a scratch. The probability is astronomical, Dr. Chen admitted, but medically it's more plausible than any other explanation. Thomas's relief was visible. He hadn't surgically implanted it while drunk. There was a medical explanation, however unlikely, but guilt remained in his eyes. His bullet, his war, his fault. Thursday morning, October 26th. Margaret's vital signs were stable. The surgical wound looked clean. No active bleeding, pain controlled with morphine. The nursing staff spoke of discharge by Friday afternoon. Thomas allowed himself to breathe. They'd survived the worst. At 1:30 that afternoon, the floor nurse noticed Margaret's temperature had climbed to 101.8 degrees, up from a normal 98.6 just 90 minutes earlier. She called Dr. Foster immediately. By 3 o'clock, Margaret's temperature had spiked to 103.2. Her blood pressure had dropped to 95/60, heart rate elevated to 115. She was confused, disoriented, asking for people who'd been dead for decades. Mom, it's Claire. Stay with me. But Margaret's eyes were unfocused, seeing something that wasn't there. Foster initiated sepsis protocol, blood cultures drawn, broad-spectrum antibiotics increased to maximum doses. Oxygen support started. Thomas stood frozen in the doorway, watching nurses swarm his wife's room. The beeping of monitors, the sharp commands, the controlled urgency. He'd seen this before. Vietnam, field hospital, watching fellow soldiers die from infected wounds. The way their eyes went distant, the way their skin turned gray, the way the medics worked frantically, but knew it was already too late. He was back there, March 10th, 1969, day after the rescue. Morrison lying on a cot, shrapnel wound in his abdomen turning septic. The medics couldn't stop it. The infection spreading through his blood like, wait, Morrison didn't die in Vietnam. He died in native stateside. Heart failure, natural causes. But Thomas's mind couldn't hold on to that truth. PTSD was fracturing his reality, mixing memories, confusing timelines. He saw Morrison's face superimposed over Margaret's, saw the field hospital's canvas tent walls instead of hospital blue paint. Mr. Thompson, a nurse touched his arm. Sir, we need you to step out for a moment. No, I need to. She needs... Sir, please. We're doing everything we can, but you need to wait outside. Claire took her father's arm, guided him into the hallway. He was shaking, hyperventilating. Dad, look at me, Dad. But Thomas was somewhere else, eyes seeing horrors, 50 years old. At 4 o'clock, the rapid response team was called. Margaret was transferred to the ICU. More monitors, more medications, mechanical ventilator, standing ready if her breathing failed. In the ICU waiting room, Claire sat with her father. He'd gone quiet now, hands clasped between his knees, rocking slightly. This is my fault, he whispered. I brought the war home. I brought that bullet home, and now it's killing her. Dad, infections happen after surgery. This isn't... You don't understand. The bullet was poisoned, with guilt, with death. 50 years of it, soaked into the metal. His voice was flat, disconnected. Everything I touch dies eventually. That's not true. Morrison died. Those 17 people died. Everyone from my unit, most of them are dead now. And Maggie's the best thing I ever had. So, of course, his voice broke. Of course she'd be next. Claire grabbed his hands. Listen to me. Mom is not going to die. She's strong. The antibiotics will work. But her own voice wavered with uncertainty. Ben sat quietly in the corner, saying nothing, but his presence was steady. A living reminder that Thomas had saved someone, that not everyone he touched died. At 6 o'clock, Dr. Foster emerged from the IC. Her face was grave. "She's in septic shock. The infection was deeper than we realized. The bacteria may have seeded before surgery, creating pockets we couldn't reach." She paused. "We're doing everything we can, but I need you to understand this is very serious." "Can we see her?" Claire asked. "One at a time, brief visits only." Thomas went first. Margaret lay in the ICU bed, ventilator breathing for her, multiple IV pumps running, monitors tracking every heartbeat. Her face was pale, almost gray. He took her hand. It felt too light, too fragile. "I've kept secrets from you," he whispered. "Thought I was protecting you by locking them away. But secrets are bullets too. They wound from inside." Margaret didn't respond. Couldn't. "If you pull through this, no more secrets. I'll open Morrison's letter. The one I've been afraid to read for 50 years. I'll tell you everything about the war, about why I'm broken, about what haunts me at night." He leaned closer. "Just please, Maggie, don't leave me. I can't do this world without you." The ventilator hissed. The monitors beeped. No other response. At 8 o'clock. The ICU doctor pulled the family aside. "The next 6 hours are critical. If she doesn't turn around soon—" He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Claire's professional composure crumbled. She excused herself, found an empty family conference room, and wept. She was a surgeon. She understood septic shock, understood that despite all modern medicine's advances, sometimes infections won. Sometimes people died from complications that should have been survivable. And her mother who'd ironed shirts every morning for 46 years, who'd baked cornbread every Thursday, who'd loved her damaged father with such steady patience, might die because of a bullet from a war that ended before Claire was born. Thomas, meanwhile, found himself in the hospital chapel at 2:30 in the morning. He hadn't prayed since Vietnam, stopped believing in God the day Morrison ordered fire on civilians. What kind of God allowed that? But now, in the dim chapel, with its generic religious imagery designed to offend no denomination, Thomas knelt. Ben sat in the pew behind him. "I don't know how to do this," Thomas said. "I forgot how to pray." "Just talk," Ben said quietly. "If there's a God, he listens." Thomas closed his eyes. "God, if you're there, and I'm not sure you are, but if you are, take me instead. She's good, pure, never hurt anyone. I'm the broken one. I'm the one who carries death. So take me. Let her live. Please." Silence. Just the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the building's HVAC system. At 3 in the morning, no change in Margaret's condition. 4 o'clock, and it still critical. 5 o'clock. Blood pressure dropping further despite maximum medication support. 5:30. A nurse rushed from Margaret's room toward the nurse's station. Thomas stood, heart hammering. This was it. This was the end. The nurse spoke urgently into the phone. Claire appeared beside her father, gripping his hand. "If she doesn't make it," Thomas said, "I won't survive it. You understand I won't." "Dad?" But then the ICU doctor emerged, and his face was different, still serious, but no longer holding death. "Her vitals are stabilizing." Thomas's knees buckled. Claire caught him. Temperature starting to drop. Blood pressure responding better to medication. I don't have a medical explanation for it, but she's turning around. At 6:45, Margaret opened her eyes. Thomas was at her bedside immediately. Maggie. She blinked slowly, focusing on him. The ventilator had been removed 20 minutes earlier. She could speak, though her voice was barely a whisper. I saw him. Saw who? Honey. Morrison, in the dark place where I was. Her eyes were clear now, certain. He had red hair, scar over his left eyebrow, Georgia accent. Thomas went cold. He'd never told Margaret what Morrison looked like, never shown her the photo. He said to tell you read the letter. Margaret's words hung in the sterile ICU air. Thomas stared at his wife, his face draining of color. You couldn't have seen Morrison. You never met him. I never showed you his picture. I know. Margaret's voice was still weak, but her eyes were clear, focused. But I saw him. He was young, maybe 26, red hair, scar over his left eyebrow, like someone had hit him with something. He had a Georgia accent, called you Tommy. Said that's what everyone called you in the unit. Thomas's hand went to his mouth. No one had called him Tommy since Vietnam. Margaret had never heard that nickname. He said, Margaret paused, gathering strength. He said he's been waiting 50 years for you to forgive him. But first, you need to read what he wrote. He said you've been carrying his guilt along with your own, and it's time to put it down. Claire stood at the foot of the bed, her medical training warring with what she was hearing. Mom, you were severely septic, delirious with fever. The brain can create very vivid, I know what I saw. Margaret's voice was firm despite its weakness. He showed me things, the village burning, the children crying, Thomas running back into the fire 3 times, Morrison standing there with his rifle, frozen, unable to help. Thomas sat down hard in the bedside chair. He told me, Margaret continued, that you saved those children while he watched, that he recommended you for the Bronze Star because it was the only thing he could do to make it right. And then he showed me. She stopped, her eyes filling. He showed me himself, alone in a psychiatric hospital, writing a letter, taking pills from a bottle, lying down to die. Jesus, Thomas whispered. He said the letter explains everything. He said you've been afraid to open it because you think you know what it says. But you're wrong. You've been wrong for 50 years. Claire retrieved her phone, pulled up the photo she'd taken of the metal box's contents. Dad, there's an unopened letter in the box from Morrison, postmarked March 1970. I know. Why haven't you read it? Because I thought I knew what it would say. An apology. Some excuse for what he did. I didn't want to hear it. Maybe you need to, Margaret said softly. At 10 o'clock that morning, with Margaret stable enough to listen, Claire retrieved the letter from her parents' house. She returned to the ICU with the yellowed envelope, still sealed after 53 years. Thomas held it in shaking hands. The handwriting on the front was neat. Careful Specialist Thomas Dutt. Thompson, General Delivery, Portland, Oregon. I can't, Thomas said. I can't do this. Then I'll read it, Claire said. She took the envelope, carefully opened it, withdrew 3 pages of lined paper covered in the same neat handwriting. Margaret reached for Thomas's hand. He gripped it like a lifeline. Claire read aloud. Dear Tommy, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not from war I made it out alive while better men died, but by my own hand. They have me in a psychiatric hospital in Virginia, say I'm getting better, but I'm not. I see their faces every night, all 17 of them, the children, the old woman, the man who is trying to shield his grandson. I gave the order. You tried to stop me. You remember what you said, sir. There are children in there. And I said, orders are orders. Soldier. But that was a lie. Tommy, command wanted a body count, but they didn't order me to fire on civilians. That was all me. My cowardice, my fear. I wanted to look like a hero. You refused to fire, threw down your rifle, said, some orders aren't worth following, sir. You were right. You were 23 years old, and you were right. And I was your commanding officer, and I was wrong. I gave the order anyway. 17 people died. Then you ran into the burning buildings. I stood there, frozen, while you pulled 12 children out. On your third trip back, you took a round in the shoulder, bled all over one of the kids while you carried her to safety. The medic pulled the bullet out of you at the field hospital. I asked to keep it. Had your initials engraved on it, T. 19 sick, because I needed something to remember. To remember that real courage looks like you, not me. I recommended you for the Bronze Star. Told command the truth about what you did. They wanted to give me a medal for the operation. I refused. Told them enough truth that they gave you the medal instead. Then they quietly transferred me out. Medical discharge. But it wasn't PTSD. Tommy, it was guilt. Deserved guilt. I'm writing this before I do what I need to do. Not suicide. I'm not brave enough for that. I'm going to make it look natural. Pills, taken slowly over weeks. Heart failure. My family gets benefits that way. Keep the bullet. It's proof that one of us tried to do right. When you look at it, don't remember my failure. Remember those 12 children. You are the hero they said you were. I'm the one who needs forgiveness, but I don't deserve it. Not from God, not from you, not from the dead. If there's any justice, I'll carry this guilt forever, and you'll finally put yours down. Because you have nothing to be guilty for. You saved 12 lives while I took 17. You were right to refuse. You were right about everything. Captain James Morrison, March 15th, 1970. Silence filled the ICU room. Claire's hands were shaking. Thomas had tears streaming down his face. Margaret squeezed his hand so tightly her knuckles were white. He died the next day, Claire said quietly. March 16th, 70. Official cause, heart failure. He was 26 years old. Ben spoke from the doorway. May I say something? Everyone turned. They'd forgotten he was there. I looked into Captain Morrison's death after your daughter contacted me. Found military records. There was an investigation after he died. Ben pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. They reviewed the incident at Da Nang. He unfolded the paper, a declassified military report. According to this, only 4 of the 17 people who died that day were killed by American fire. The other 13 died from Viet Cong artillery that hit the village at the same time. Thomas stared. What? Morrison blamed himself for all 17, but he only killed 4. Ben's voice was gentle. Still terrible, still wrong. But he carried more than 3 times the guilt he should have. Just like you've carried guilt that isn't yours, Margaret said, looking at her husband. Thomas couldn't speak. 50 years, 50 years of believing Morrison had massacred 17 innocent people, 50 years of guilt for not stopping it. And the truth was more complicated than either of them had known. Dr. Foster and Dr. Chen entered for afternoon rounds. They found the family clustered around Margaret's bed. An old letter spread between them. "Mrs. Thompson, you're looking much better." Dr. Foster said, "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck, but alive." Dr. Chen held a tablet with pathology reports. "I have results on the tissue we removed. I think I can explain how the bullet transferred." Everyone looked at him. "Mr. Thompson, your old shoulder injury, the scar tissue was breaking down, common in elderly patients. The body sometimes begins to reject foreign material it's carried for decades, even material that's been encapsulated for years." Thomas touched his shoulder unconsciously. "On your anniversary, you had too much wine. You mentioned scratching at your shoulder. I don't remember clearly. The bullet was working its way to the surface. When you scratched the old scar, you created a small opening. Your body was trying to expel it." Dr. Chen pulled up images on his tablet. "Mrs. Thompson, do you remember having any small scratches or cuts on your chin around that time?" Margaret thought. "The cat, she scratched me, just barely, but enough to bleed a little. When you and your husband embraced that night, both of you had small open wounds. The bullet, partially expelled from his tissue, transferred through direct contact and lymphatic fluid exchange into your tissue through the scratch." "That's medically possible?" Claire asked. "Probability is less than 1 in a billion. But yes, we've documented foreign body migration through lymphatic channels, usually within one body, but theoretically, in perfect conditions, intimate contact, both wounds fresh, the foreign object already mobile transfer between bodies is possible. So my body was trying to give it to her," Thomas said slowly, "literally trying to pass the burden. In a sense, yes." Margaret smiled weakly. "For better or worse, Tom, in sickness and in health, even when sickness comes from wars, you can't forget." Thomas brought her hand to his lips, kissed it gently. 46 years, and you're still carrying my weight." "Well," she said, "now it's out, finally out of both of us." Saturday, October 28th, Margaret was moved from the ICU back to a regular room. The infection was under control, antibiotics working, wound healing properly. Thomas sat beside her bed, reading Morrison's letter again, and this time without tears. "I forgive you, James," he whispered to the yellowed pages, "and I forgive myself." Margaret watched him, her hand resting on his. 50 years is long enough to carry someone else's guilt. Sunday morning, Margaret walked without assistance for the first time. Her steps were slow, careful, but steady. She paused at the bathroom mirror, touched the small scar on her chin where the stitches were already dissolving. "My war wound?" she said with a slight smile. Thomas stood behind her, meeting her eyes in the reflection. "I'm sorry you have to carry that. Better to carry it together than you carry alone." She turned to face him. "That's what we've always done, Tom, carried each other." Monday afternoon, discharge day, Dr. Chen made his final rounds. The bullet will be disposed of as medical waste unless you want to keep it. Thomas looked at the specimen cup on the bedside table. T.W. 1909. Still visible through the plastic. 53 years of guilt made tangible. No, he said firmly. Dispose of it. We're done carrying it. Claire looked surprised. Dad, are you sure you kept it for 50 years? That was long enough, Ma. Time to let Morrison rest, time to let it go. Before leaving the hospital, Ben visited one last time. He brought photographs his family gathered at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. 4 grown children, their spouses, 9 grandchildren ranging from toddlers to teenagers. This family exists because of you, Ben said, spreading the photos on Margaret's tray table. Then he pulled out more photographs. I found the other 11 people you rescued, all alive, all with families. He laid them out one by one, 47 children between them, 89 grandchildren. 136 people exist because you didn't give up. Thomas stared at the faces, generations of lives stemming from one day of courage. I spent 50 years thinking about 4 deaths, he said, voice breaking. Count these instead. Ben replied gently. 2 months later, December 24th, Margaret was fully recovered, the scar on her chin barely visible under makeup. She stood in their kitchen, the same yellow curtains filtering afternoon light, making cornbread for Christmas Eve dinner. Claire was there, too. She'd taken a position at Legacy Emmanuel, moved back to Portland in November. Realized I'd been running from something, she'd told them. Needed to come home. The metal box that had lived locked in Thomas's nightstand for 50 years now sat on the living room mantel, open for anyone to see. Inside the bronze star medal, Morrison's letter in a protective sleeve, the photograph of Thomas and Morrison with their arms around each other, and a newspaper clipping about the rescue, and one new addition, an empty bullet casing from a shooting range, fired just last week. This one holds no guilt, Thomas had said. Just closure. Thomas attended veteran support group meetings now, every Thursday evening at the VFW hall, finally talking about the war, about Morrison, about carrying guilt that wasn't his to carry. New Year's Eve, Margaret and Thomas stood on their front porch as fireworks exploded over Portland's skyline. For the first time in 50 years, Thomas didn't flinch at the sounds. Margaret's hand rested in his, her thumb, tracing the small scar on her chin. His hand covered hers, his thumb touching his shoulder scar through his shirt. 2 scars, 1 story, indeed. Claire laughed on the phone with her new boyfriend, her voice carrying through the open window. The radio played softly. What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. You know what Morrison got wrong in that letter? Thomas said quietly. What's that, honey? He said, I'd carry guilt forever. Thomas looked at his wife. This woman who'd stood beside him for 46 years, who'd literally carried his war inside her own body for 2 weeks. But he was wrong, turns out. When you share a burden long enough, it becomes something else. Margaret smiled. It becomes love. That's what we've always done, Maggie. Carried each other. The fireworks painted the sky in brilliant colors, gold, silver, blue. Thomas watched them without fear, without flinching, Margaret's hand warm in his. 46 years of marriage, 50 years of silence, broken. 1 bullet, finally released. and two people who'd learned that the weight of the past, when shared, could become light enough to let go. The wars we carry don't have to destroy us. Sometimes, with the right person beside us, they can teach us what love truly means. Not the absence of scars, but the courage to bear them together. Sometimes the heaviest things we carry aren't visible to anyone else. Thomas carried a bullet for 50 years. Not just the physical metal, but the weight of guilt, the silence of unspoken truths, the fear of being truly known. How many of us carry our own bullets, old regrets we've never voiced, words we wish we'd said to someone now gone, mistakes we've held on to so long they've become part of who we are. Margaret and Thomas's story reminds us that love isn't about perfection, it's about being willing to carry each other's burdens, even literally. It's about 46 years of showing up, of ironing blue shirts, of holding trembling hands during fireworks. It's about children who come home and finally understand their parents' silence. It's about discovering that the things we've been ashamed of our whole lives might actually be the seeds of our greatest courage. What burden have you been carrying alone that might grow lighter if you shared it? Is there someone in your life who's been carrying you without you even realizing it? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.